everyone, I'm Maki. I'm sure many of you are eagerly awaiting the release of Hathaway's Flash. It seems that release dates are being announced in countries outside Japan, too. Today, I'd like to share some information from the Japanese magazine Gundam released on 26 March. It's about the highlights of the mobile suits as shared by Mr. Nobuhiko Genmon, who worked as both a mechanical designer and a mechanical supervisor. He crafted the mobile suit battle scenes with incredible attention to detail and care. Let me talk you through some of the moments he poured his passion into. Each one is very brief, but if you watch closely, you'll definitely be able to spot them. Please note that today's episode contains spoilers for the film. If you'd prefer to experience the story without prior knowledge, I recommend skipping this episode for now. Then come back and watch it after you've seen the film. You'll be able to focus on new details during your second viewing and beyond. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing for just 99 cents a month. As a thank you, you'll receive a name badge and exclusive comment stamps. Alright, let's get started. First, let's discuss some information about the Gundam. I'm sure many of you are wondering if the Gundam will be upgraded in the third film. Genma shared a hint related to that question. He proposed the following idea: many fans are familiar with the Gundam design that appears in games. What if we first introduce the game version design and then have it power up mid-story into the novel version design? However, after discussion, they concluded that Maki doesn't have time for a power-up. Even if a power-up were possible, it would have been deployed in that state from the very beginning. So the idea was ultimately rejected. Nevertheless, Genma found the idea of changing the design of the Gundam very appealing. He decided to exploit the idea that the novel version has a heavier, more armored appearance than the game version. This led to the climactic scene, where the Gundam's facial armor falls away to reveal the familiar Gundam face underneath. This moment surprised many fans. I was excited too when I saw it. It's a scene that came to life thanks to Genma's commitment to identifying and utilizing the most compelling elements, even if the original concept was rejected. By this point, you probably figured out the answer to the question I mentioned at the beginning of this section. Will the Gundam power up in the third film? Unfortunately, the answer is no. In fact, the reality is closer to a power down. During the second film, the mechanics warned Hathaway not to use the funnel missiles. This is because they have limited stock remaining. They need to conserve them for the final battle. However, he ends up using the missiles in the fight against mass-produced new Gundam. There is a scene in which the missiles can be seen flying towards the mass-produced new Gundam. They move so fast that they are probably not clearly visible unless you check frame by frame. The Gundam loses both its weapons and parts of its armor. The final battle is likely to be even more difficult than in the novel. That said, the fact that it doesn't power up doesn't mean that its appearance won't change. As Genma mentioned, there's a very high chance that the Gundam will undergo some kind of change. Next, let's talk about the Messer. In the second film, a mobile suit called the Messer Type M01 appears. This is because the Messer is produced at multiple factories and is not manufactured under a completely unified standard. Its basic performance and capabilities are the same as those of the standard Messer. Genma referred to this version of the mecha as the type. The mecha that appears in the first film is called the F-type. So what exactly do the letters M and F stand for? Genma explained it like this. The mecha is produced at different factories, so the exterior appearance varies. However, the core performance and internal frame are the same. Since they look different, they are given different names for convenience. The letters M and F don't have any particular meaning. They were tentatively assigned as abbreviations for male and female. I found this really interesting about the mecha, especially the idea of being produced at multiple factories. This concept actually appears in the story of Victory Gundam. The main mobile suit, the Victory Gundam, is manufactured in a distributed way, with parts produced separately across multiple factories. This situation is very similar to that of Maki. Of course, it's currently impossible to say whether there is any connection between Maki and the legal military. Perhaps in the future, the creators will explore this element further and develop new stories based on it. In the meantime, it's enjoyable for us to imagine the different possibilities. Now, let's take a look at some of the highlights from the battle scenes. Interestingly, there is also a hint of Victory Gundam influence here. This concerns the climactic battle scene in the second film. At one point, the Gundam uses a beam saber to take down a ghost of cow. Genma put a lot of passion into this scene, too. In the early stages of the concept, the idea was fairly standard: hold the beam saber hilt in hand, generate the blade, and defeat the enemy. However, Genma decided to change that. The Gundam's beam saber has a function that enables blades to be generated from both ends of the hilt. He therefore proposed attacking by generating the blade while the beam saber was still attached to the backpack. However, the director was a little puzzled by this idea. This was because it would end up looking similar to the wings of light attack used by the Bully 2 Gundam. It might not match the design of the Gundam well. Nevertheless, Genma patiently persuaded the director. As a result, the scene in which the Gundam defeats an enemy while using the beam saber still mounted on its backpack was brought to life. This is definitely a moment worth paying attention to. However, it seems to be very brief. To be honest, I wasn't able to spot it myself. It looks like you need to watch the climactic battle very carefully to catch it. As this information comes from an interview published in the official magazine Gundam Ace, it isn't likely to be incorrect. I really hope you'll be able to see the Gundam performing an attack similar to that of the Bully 2 Gundam. Now, regarding the beam saber scene we discussed earlier, the director has more to say. Genma wanted to make use of the feature whereby the Gundam's beam saber hilt can generate blades from both ends. However, the director had some concerns, asking, if you use that function, wouldn't there be a risk of accidentally hitting yourself? Genma replied passionately, I'll make sure it's directed in a way that avoids self-inflicted damage, so please let me do it. And that's how the scene resembling the Bully 2 Gundam style attack with the Gundam came to be. What's more, Genma incorporated the director's concern about accidentally attacking oneself into the scene itself. At the end of the battle, the Gundam thrusts its beam saber into the cockpit of the mass-produced new Gundam. With just a little more force, Lene would have been killed. In that scene, the Gundam's beam saber generates blades from both ends. if the intention is merely to attack the enemy, the rear braid is super force. Logic creates a feature that could have been disabled. However, Hathaway didn't turn it off. Genma explained this by saying even though he's attacking his opponent, it looks like he's about to slice into his own cockpit. With the beam saber as well, it creates a moment where you can sense the madness in Hathaway's state of mind. During the attack, Gigi shouts stop. Hearing how he regains his composure and holds the attack. Many viewers probably interpret this as Gigi saving Lane. However, if the attack had continued, Hathaway himself would have been burned by the blade of the beam saber and killed. Just before this scene, we see that Hathaway is struggling with his guilt and seems to be trying to punish himself. Although it seems as though he is attacking Lane, he is actually trying to pass judgment on himself. It is Gigi's words that saved Hathaway. But was this outcome truly a salvation for Hathaway as well? For those familiar with the novel's ending, this is a point that leaves room for debate. Genma poured passion into the mechanical action. When you watch the film, I hope you take a close look at it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I'll see you again in the next episode.